Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I'll be showing you guys some beginner tips and tricks to help you get better at the Spirit. If you're familiar with the basics and ready to take your gameplay to the next level, you're in the right place. But first, a quick disclaimer, I'm not a pro at Spirit by all means, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. If you want to skip to a specific time, there will be timestamps in the description below. Now, let's dive in. The Spirit is a 4.4 meters per second, 24 meter average height killer. Now what that means is that she's slower than most killers, but compensates for having a small turret radius and a strong power. But having a 4.4 meters per second movement speed means that most of the time she might not be able to catch up to a survivor before they reach a pallet or a window, etc. And therefore she needs to rely more on her power. However, she's not completely useless without her power. When she's not using her power, she has this thing where she passively phases, making her intermittently invisible. Think of this as lagging. On your end, nothing changes, but for the survivors, at times, you might stop/go invisible for a few milliseconds. Now this could genuinely confuse a survivor and make them drop a pallet or vault a window early, make them mess up, right? But this is not a viable strategy, and therefore you need to focus more and more on your power. Also, one more thing to mention, and new players might not know this, but when the Spirit phases and ends her phase and starts to attack, her attacks are considered basic attacks, therefore making her synergize really well with like insta-downs and perks that apply effects like Sabi Butcher and Stabiffle and stuff like that. And now that we've gotten the basics out of the way, we can move on to the important part, how to use your power effectively. Imoka's Haunting, aka the Spirit's power, is her main strength. It has upsides and downsides, which makes her have a lot of strengths but also weaknesses. Let's talk about them. For strengths, she has high mobility, good snowball, a great hit and run, and is overall great with mind games. Let's dive deeper into these. So for mobility, her phase walk allows her to cover large distances very quickly, but at the expense of a long cooldown. She's great with snowball at base, but this can be further increased with the perk Sabi Butcher and Save the Best for Last, aka Stabiffle, making her a nightmare to deal with. Or, if snowballing is not your style, you can always play her with a hit and run playstyle. Hit and run basically means to find a survivor, hit them, and then leave them and go for someone else who's healthy. With this strategy, Spirit players can easily find someone, get a quick hit with their phase, and find someone else immediately. And this is generally a really good strategy because Spirit relies on audio cues, and with injured survivors, they'll become one-shot and you can easily be able to track them down. And this playstyle is further supported by, yet again, Sabi Butcher and Save the Best for Last. Last, but certainly not least, her biggest strength is mind games. While phasing, survivors can't see you, but you can't see them. However, they hear a directional audio cue, but this isn't so accurate because they can't see you, and the directional audio isn't very accurate. So you can take advantage of this by trying to throw survivors off. You can double back or even triple back to throw the survivors off. This will increase the chance of them making a mistake, but sometimes it's not really necessary. Pay attention to how the survivor plays. If they double back too and start to make mistakes, you'll know that the strategy is working. But if they don't and just keep holding W, just keep following them. If you notice that the scratch marks in your phase are starting to disappear as you start to phase, immediately end your phase. It means that the survivor is walking and trying to throw you off. Don't fall for this. So instead of falling for it, end your power and check around for them. And sometimes they won't expect you to immediately end your phase, and you can surprise them by not falling for their trick and getting an easy hit. And also, at oftentimes, survivors might just leave the loop entirely. So if you notice that they're more times than others leaving the loop instead of trying to play around it, you can actually use that to your advantage. Keep track of which survivor likes to leave the loop and go to another one, and which one likes to stick to it. If they stick to it, simply use your power, a double back, triple back, whatever you have to do to make them make a mistake and get the down. But if they leave the loop, instead of actually committing to your phase, you can fake it and catch them off guard as they're leaving. Or you can just enter your phase and catch up to them that way. But be careful, they also might try to throw you off by walking. So remember, don't fall for this. Alright, let's move on to her weaknesses. Her weaknesses include, but are not limited to, sound dependency, cooldown management, and, shocker, pallets. For sound dependency, obviously Spirit relies on sound cues, and perks like Iron Will can easily counter you. And also, Not to mention, if you have a lack of hearing, Spirit at times can be very hard or even impossible to play without good hearing. So if you have a hearing deficiency or a bad headset, Spirit's probably not the best killer for you. Cooldown management. A mistimed phase walks can leave you vulnerable at times when you don't have your power ready. So knowing when and when not to use your power is the key difference to a successful match and a loss. So make sure that you're using your power sparingly so you can use it again and again in quick sections if you have to. And of course, just like any other killer, pallets. Spirit is countered by pre-dropping pallets and of course, holding W. And because of her 4.4 meters per second movement speed, playing around pallets without her power is incredibly hard for her. It's like looping a huntress. Survivors will get very, 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 very greedy when you're not in your power. So make sure that you use your power to counter pallets. And like we discussed before, use those mind games and try to double back as much as possible. And even when she is using her power, pallets can be very tedious at times, especially if there's a ton on a single map. Especially one map in particular. Having to end phase just to break a pallet and catch up again can be very annoying at times. So you'll have to play very well to avoid these common scenarios. Alright, now let's move on to some quick tips and tricks. Use short, frequent phase walks to keep survivors guessing. This technique, known as juke phasing, which makes you unpredictable, is a very good way to counter survivors who stop running and walk during your phase, like we discussed before, to try and throw you off. If you use all of your power and fully deplete it, you're gonna have to wait a long time before you can use it again, which, like we said before, can leave you very vulnerable in times where you desperately need it. But if you use your power sparingly and only use quick bursts of it, you'll find that your matches will be way, way better. Because not only do you have your power more often, but quick phasing is not only just a good way to slowly learn Spirit and confuse survivors, but it's also a really good method for your cooldown management. Also, before entering a phase, or entering a chase in general, try to identify which area you're in and what tiles the survivor has to work with. You'll have to use different types of mind games and strategies to outplay certain loops, like TNL walls, jungle gyms, etc. Different mind games work better for different loops, so having to identify which loop the survivor is going to can really help you win those chases. You can also try and cut the survivors off if they're trying to make it to another loop after you just broke a pallet. You can quickly enter your phase and try to cut them off before they reach a stronger tile like Shack or another TNL. Also, try to look down while phasing. Since you can't see the survivors, there's nothing to be looking at when you're looking up. So instead, point your camera down and focus only on the scratch marks. And like we've said before, if they disappear, end phase and check around. If they don't disappear, keep following them. And also listen closely for the survivor's footsteps. Because on top of trying to juke you with their scratch marks, they can also crouch to hide their running noises. And sometimes they might even make a 180 and run back into you to try and confuse you. If the survivor's running noises or breathing suddenly gets loud, know that they just went behind you. So immediately make a 180 and keep following them or end phase if you have to. Oh, and also, I forgot to mention, when you're phasing and you suddenly start to hear their breathing, or if they're injured and they're moaning loudly, don't immediately end your phase. When their moaning sounds become audible, that doesn't mean that you're directly on top of them. They can be heard from quite a distance. So if you hear them and they're going in a certain direction, keep phasing for about half or a full second more, and then end your phase. You'll end much closer to them. And you can utilize the post-phase speed boost for a greater lunge and potentially get better hits. And for the last tip that I'm gonna give you guys, just have a good headset. That's really all it is. I mean, Spirit, the whole point of playing Spirit is to track survivors with audio cues. So having a good headset is basically the difference between wins and losses. And also, don't use Spotify. Just don't. Unless if you're really confident, don't use Spotify. Just don't. Not when you're playing Spirit, specifically Spirit. Any other killer, yeah, sure, you can Spotify and chill, but not with Spirit. You need to rely on those audio cues. Okay, now that I've given you guys some tips to get better at Spirit, now we're gonna talk about her add-ons. Spirit has many good and powerful add-ons that can make her power much better, but the 4 following add-ons are just great for beginners. The first one is the Rusty Flute, which reduces your phase walk recharge time, allowing you to use your power more frequently. And this is probably one of, if not her best add-on, as her power normally takes about 15 seconds to fully recharge if you use all of it. With this add-on, if you fully deplete your power, it comes back in 10 seconds, effectively shaving off 5 whole seconds from the cooldown. And the cooldown becomes even shorter if you know how to use your power wisely. The second add-on is the Muddy Sports Day Cap, which significantly increases your movement speed while phasing. This is a game changer. Extra speed is always a win in every scenario. It's good for mobility, chase, mind games, etc. It's honestly a favorite pick of mine. The third add-on is the White Hair Ribbon, which decreases the time to enter a phase walk. As you may or may not know, when Spirit wants to enter a phase, she first needs to charge it up, kind of like Demogorgon or Wesker, but instead of being able to move, she stands still. With this add-on, you enter your phase 20% faster, which is good because it gives survivors less time to make distance, and therefore allowing you to catch up faster once you enter your phase. And the last add-on that I'm going to recommend for you guys is Rin's Broken Watch. It's basically the same as the Rusty Flute, except it's a lower rarity, and therefore it's slightly weaker, but only worse by 10%. And I did the math. This add-on, it's only worse by the Rusty Flute by just 1 second, so not really that big of a deal. If you can't afford the Rusty Flute, you can just use Rin's Broken Watch. It's always a really nice add-on. These add-ons can make the Spirit even more formidable than she already is by reducing her cooldowns, increasing speed, and improving overall effectiveness. But again, it all depends on your playstyle and what type of add-ons you prefer. So again, use what you think matches your preference and playstyle. Alright, now we're going to move on to the build that I'm going to showcase for you guys. If you're looking for an effective perk build, consider the following: Sloppy Butcher, Corrupt Intervention, Save the Best for Last, and Scourge Hook Pain Resonance. I'll explain what each of these perks do and why you should equip them. For Sloppy Butcher, it increases the frequency of survivors being injured and bleeding. So when you hit them with your basic attack, they get inflicted with mangled and hemorrhage, making it extremely hard for them to heal, which is obviously good for you, because again, Spirit, injured survivors with Spirit, it's just perfect, and also them being injured makes them one tap. So overall, really good perk. If you struggle a bit in chase, you can always replace this for Bamboozle. It's always a good sub. And the next perk is Corrupt Intervention. It blocks the 3 furthest generators from you at the start of the match, giving you more time to set up and apply pressure. Now, the reason Corrupt is so good, and you see this a lot in killer builds, is because the early game is the most crucialist part of the match, and having a good or bad early game makes all the difference between a win and a loss. Stabiffle, obviously, I mentioned this before. Whenever you hit someone, you gain a token up to a maximum of 8. Each token reduces your cooldown for a successful basic attack by 4%. So once you have all 8 stacks, your cooldown is so fast, allowing you to hit, phase, down, repeat. It's also really good for endgame if all 4 survivors are alive and they're attempting a 3-man hook. With this perk, you can immediately negate that. If you have 8 stacks, it becomes very hard for them to unhook and to get everyone out alive because of your fast recovery. The final perk is Scourge Hook Pain Resonance. This is a Scourge Hook perk. At the start of the match, 4 Scourge Hooks spawn, taking the place of regular hooks. When you hook someone on one of those hooks for the first time, the gem with the most progress explodes by 20% and starts to regress automatically. The reason that this perk is so good is because right now it's meta, and obviously you need to have some gen defense in there. If you don't like Pain Resonance, you can always swap it out for something else like Pop Goes the Weasel or Surge, something like that. Now, if you don't have Stabiffle unlocked, or if you don't have Michael Myers, you can always swap it out for Noed, and you'll get the same value, because Spirit synergizes with insta-downs. And overall, this is a pretty good build because it focuses on maintaining pressure and slowing down the survivor's progress, giving you more control over the match, and allowing you to snowball, and overall have a much easier time playing with Spirit, as well as making you stronger and stronger as the match progresses, thanks to Save the Best for Last. And if you know what you're doing, you can bounce back from almost unwinnable positions. Trust me when I say I've played a lot of games with this build, and there will be often times where I would have been guaranteed to lose, but because of just one perk, it could have been either a Pain Rest, a Biffle, or Sloppy. One perk oftentimes would win me back the entire game. I would either snowball, catch them off guard, or just delay the gens to the bitter end, to the point where they would make a mistake, and that one mistake on their end would cause me to win to the entire match. Alright, and that's gonna do it for today's guide. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please make sure to leave a like, a sub, and turn on notifications so that you'll never miss an upload. In conclusion, mastering Spirit takes practice, patience, and a keen understanding of the survivor's behavior. And I hope that with these advanced tips and strategies that I've showed you today can hopefully make you better at the Spirit. And yeah, thanks for watching, and good luck.